Well, folks, we have done it. We have hit another milestone on this channel. Just recently, we finally reached 850 subs, and I have to once again say, I am genuinely so thankful to all of you beautiful people for helping me get this far. It's insane how, after so long, we're finally almost at the finish line of 1K. And to celebrate hitting 850, I asked all you wonderful viewers what you wanted to see via community poll. And the winner of the choices was my list for top 10 DS games. Now, I love the DS. It's honestly my favorite handheld of all time, and would be my favorite console if the PS2 didn't exist. This list was tough though, just due to how many amazing titles existed on the dual screen juggernaut. But after some very careful consideration, I think I narrowed them down. With that said, kick back, relax, insert that GBA for a couple in-game bonuses, and let's get into it. When the Nintendo DS was unveiled to the world, not only did it introduce the idea of dual-screen gaming on a single console, but also touchscreen gaming to Nintendo hardware. And with it, many developers wanted to use it for a bunch of new and unique ideas, which led us to probably the most experimental era of Nintendo gaming. And out of every gaming company taking a swing at the new hardware, Pokemon Company was at the forefront with the release of their all-new series, Pokemon Ranger, which was an experience to say the least. Yeah, upon a revisit, the first game in the series doesn't really hold up all that well. The Pokemon's frantic AI, coupled with the overly punishing capture mechanic, made the experiments way more irritating than it actually needed to be. So when a sequel was greenlit, the developers said to themselves, okay, let's make a second game, but this time make it good. And thus, Shadows of Almia was born, a title that basically improves on every lacking aspect of the first game. Gameplay was now far more fun with the inclusion of the capture bar and being able to swap partners. Characters were much more interesting, and the villain theme was actually pretty memorable. It's amazing how much they improved upon a single sequel. Granted, Game Freak has done this multiple times before, but I digress. They also released Guardians of Light, which is a great title too, but honestly, I still think the best is Shadows. And while part of me is rather sad the 3DS didn't continue this series, at the same time, I'm also kind of glad it ended before it went on too long and turned out to burn out on its own creativity. So, Mario Party and handheld consoles. When you hear these put together into the same sentence, it certainly sounds like it's a surefire way to create some easy money and sell a bunch of copies. But sadly, these two aspects seem to go together as well as peanut butter and rotten sardines. They've tried. They've certainly tried. Several of them have been released, but so many of them either end up as mediocre titles, or they just put out the minigames and that's it. Still cannot believe they thought that was okay, but whatever. However, despite so many flops, there has been one attempt at this that I think has truly been successful, and that was Mario Party on the DS. This title is the pure definition of unfairly overlooked because it is a gem. Several boards, dozens of great minigames, a whole ass story mode with boss fights included. In comparison to so many other titles released on handhelds, there was a genuine amount of effort put into this one that deserved far more respect than it actually got. It's a shame it gets overlooked as much as it does, due to the handheld's reception of these Mario Party titles pretty much sinking any fan's hope of them being good, but maybe one day Mario Party DS will get the respect it deserves. Another Mario spin-off title lands into the top 10, and this time it's the DS era of Mario Kart. Now, to be totally honest, I don't have as much nostalgia or fond memories for the DS title as many others do. Mine are more or less tied to playing the 3DS version with my friends during high school, which I mentioned in the top 10 3DS video, go check that one out, shameless plug over. But it doesn't mean I don't love its DS entry, as it's still an incredible title on its own. While it possessed many aspects of what makes a great Mario Kart title, large cast of characters, great tracks, fun and troll-worthy items, what really stood out to me was its all new inclusions to help shake up the formula. The mission mode was a lot of fun to go through and added a really cool single player experience that you never really get to see in most Mario Kart titles. Getting to customize your own emblems for karts led to some genuinely impressive and downright hilarious designs that I'm still shocked by to this day. And of course, this was the first title in the series to introduce online play, which would allow you to race against anyone you wanted across the world, which, believe me, I took full advantage of when I could. It wasn't my personal favorite, but it was without a doubt a damn good game. When it comes to the topic of Gen 5 Pokemon, I feel like it's either going to be on any fan's top 10 worst or their top 10 best, considering just how insanely divisive the 5th generation entry was. It did a lot of things that ended up splitting longtime fans of the franchise down the middle, where to this day you can still find them arguing about it. And as for me, this game is easily a top 10 best. I loved so many of the ideas, like the deeper narrative that truly questioned the bonds between a trainer and their Pokemon. The fact that you could only catch Unova Pokemon made strategizing around building your team a lot more interesting than just grabbing the ones you were used to. And N was probably one of the best antagonists the series has ever introduced. Plus, Samurott and Haxorus are like top 5 coldest designs of all time. Like, look at these motherfuckers. They are so cool. The game itself is just a great time as well. And I honestly would have considered putting higher if there weren't so many other great titles on the DS. You know, I love myself a good trilogy. Something about following a franchise's humble beginnings all the way to their satisfying third conclusions is just something so magical. One of my personal favorites of this being the Phoenix Wright games. And out of that entire trilogy, my absolute favorite game in it has to be the finale, Trials and Tribulations. Well, this game does a phenomenal job with wrapping up the trilogy from Phoenix coming into his own, bringing back every character they can for the final trial, having arguably the best prosecutor in the series, and yet, of course, another absolutely stellar soundtrack. What really wins it over for me is all the extra stuff in the game. Getting to play as Mia and meeting younger versions of Phoenix Wright and Edgeworth, playing as Edgeworth and hearing all the goofy stories of his childhood from Larry. Francisca teams up with Phoenix. So many moments that just put a big dumb smile on my face. And while I have liked a lot of later titles, this game will forever be the absolute pinnacle of Ace Attorney for me. No ifs, ands, or buts. So, Spirit Tracks as a whole is probably going to be a pretty divisive pick for the people watching. And truthfully, I get why. I love this game and find it to be massively underrated. But it's also one of those instances where I can totally understand why so many people dislike the title, due to its insane over-reliance on the touchscreen. And while I do think it goes a bit overboard at points myself, I still stand by my decision. This game just has so much charm and genuine personality etched into the title that I can completely overlook those issues in the long run. The puzzles and dungeons are as super fun as they have always been, but my personal favorite aspect was the train system. Zelda as a series doesn't really have a lot of transportation stuff outside of the horses and the few times you get a ship, so this game having this big train you're the conductor of is a fun mix of goofy and unique that I really liked. It made traversing the lands a lot more interesting than I expected. I feel like more people would have given this game more of a chance if you could just toggle the controls instead of only using stylus movements. It's a shame because as a result, people missed out on a genuinely overlooked Zelda title. Okay, so I've had a lot of Pocket Monster titles on this top 10, mainly because Pokemon was just straight up dominating the handheld market during this era. But I'll be real, this is the final Pokemon game on this list, I promise. Now, I adored the first Mystery Dungeon title. It's easily one of the best Pokemon games in the business, and a really good GBA and DS game in and of its own. But it was also kind of lacking in a couple areas, mainly in the narrative department, so when the sequel was announced, I was hopeful it would improve on the first game's shortcomings. And once I got my hands on it, woo boy, did it improve and then some. While there were improvements to gameplay like new items and dungeons, some mini-games, along with a plethora of new Pokemon to meet, the best improvements were to its narrative and its cast. Your partner now felt like an actual character with flaws and character growth. The world felt like it was much more fleshed out by turning the Rescue Team concept into a guild and having you explore it as part of your job. It even introduced an entire post-game that tied to the main story. And Explorers of Sky added on more when it was released by introducing character-focused side stories to flesh out the cast, like Bidoof wanting to get stronger so he won't hold back the guild, or Grovyle and Dusknoir teaming up in the ruined future. It really made you fall in love with this cast more than you already did. Trust me, if there were any Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game you should play, it is this one without a shadow of a doubt. It is that good. So, when people talk about the Castlevania DS run, a lot of people point out how similar it was to the GBA era. where its biggest heavy hitters were all 2D action RPG Metroidvanias. But one major difference in this new era is in the title's overall quality. While the GBA era started off decent and ended absolutely fantastically, the DS era is just back-to-back bangers all the way around, with all 3 titles being worthy of being in a single top 10. But out of the 3 of them, my pick for this list would have to go to none other than Order of Ecclesia, as it's not only my favorite Castlevania game on the DS, it's my favorite Castlevania just period. While the dark gothic aesthetic and Metroidvania style levels are as amazing as they've always been, my absolute favorite aspect of this game was the glyph system, as it allowed the player to utilize things like dual wielding or these crazy super move strikes. It's so much fun and honestly a total blast and a half. I kinda wanna replay it now that I think about it. If Konami ever decides to get off their asses and make a new Metroidvania title, I really hope they take some lessons from this one. Yeah, I feel like this was a no-brainer kind of pick for this list. I feel like every single top 10 list about games for the Nintendo DS is pretty much incomplete without one of the 2 Mario and Luigi titles on it at one point. But which one deserved to make the cut? Well, after some consideration, I decided that the second place slot had to go to none other than Bowser's Inside Story. The gameplay is as top tier as it's always been throughout the series, while adding new concept like the use of badges to utilize more mechanics in battle, and a ton, and I mean a ton of new bros attacks. But the single best addition was being able to play as none other than the Koopa King himself, who not only hits like a fucking truck, Jesus Christ, comes with all sorts of new abilities for Bowser to utilize, like being able to suck enemies up, no homo, and swallow them whole. I wonder how much uncomfortable fan art this led to being created with this kind of power. Don't look that up if you're curious on what I mean. Another cool aspect was that this game lets you basically use Mario and Luigi to alter Bowser's molecular structure to help with overworld problems. This game just has a near amount of endless praises you could give it. It's easy to see why I and many others consider it the pinnacle of Mario and Luigi, even if its remake is kind of contributed to the downfall of Alpha Dream as a whole. So, we're now about to reach the number 1 slot on this list. But before that, let's go over some honorable mentions real quick. Buckle up, because there were a lot of them this time around. DBZ Attack of the Saiyans. A fun turn-based Dragon Ball RPG with some cool ideas for its own version of canon. Unfortunately, it's bogged down by some pretty poor character balancing. Jump Ultimate Stars. One of the few times Smash Bros. And anime ended up working incredibly well together. Sadly, the main story is super boring and doesn't take advantage of the game being a crossover all that much. Pokemon Black and White 2. Fantastic sequels that capture the quality of the first Black and White. If I didn't already have 3 Pokemon titles on this list, it would have made the cut. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Rings of Fate and Echoes of Time. Fun titles that capture the energy of the original Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube, but I don't really think I enjoy either enough to put them in the top 10. Game kinda close though. New Super Mario Bros. It brought back the genre of 2D Mario games, and it is a lot of fun. But I think I prefer the Wii version more than its DS release. Mario Hoops 3-on-3. This is the only game in Mario history where Luigi can slam dunk on a ninja from Final Fantasy while battling on the iconic airships. If it doesn't get an honorable mention for that alone, I really don't know what does. So, when it comes to my number 1 pick, the one that I ended up choosing is honestly a lot more than just that. It's more than just my favorite DS game. It's pretty much my favorite game of all time. A game that got me through a time where I chose to believe in bottling up how I felt and never opened about my interest or issues to anyone. A game that convinced me to open up to others during a time where I was struggling. That game was none other than The World Ends With You. Not only was this title one of, if not the best on the DS in terms of utilizing all of its hardware to its fullest potential, like shouting into the mic for attacks, swiping across the screen to do slashing, tapping to shoot bullets and lightning beams, dragging your stylus across to summon flames, using the top screen to control your partner, but it was also just a complete and total masterclass in storytelling as a whole, with amazing characters and a well-paced plot that made you really relate to the cast if you were someone going through the same struggles characters like Neku and the rest of the cast were facing. Which is what I did, as I really related to the concept of not being able to open up to other people in my teenage years.
This game showed me that that's possible to do so as long as I let others in. Thanks to this game, I was actually able to make some friends during middle school, and I'll be forever grateful for that. That, along with just how fun the whole thing is, easily makes it my favorite game ever, and why I chose it to put at the #1 spot. If you're someone who feels like they struggle to fit in, or just can't open up to anyone because of your own limitations, play this game. Trust me, it'll help you in ways you couldn't even imagine. With everything having been said and done, we have now reached the end of this special. Thank you all for tuning into another Sub-Spectacular, and again, I can't stress this enough, thank you all so much for supporting me and my content. We're finally on the home stretch to 1K, and I couldn't be happier. That's also going to be when we do another sub-special, so if you want to see that happen, do me a solid and like and subscribe down below, hit the bell for some notifications for when my videos go up, and I'm curious, what was your favorite DS title? Or do you possibly have some fond memories of the DS? Let me know in the comments down below, or if you want, just say hi if you want to help me in the algorithm and chat it up. That's all, have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for more videos.